It is Trial Tuesday, and once again, and today we're talking about estate planning and how important it is to take care of that final will early in order to avoid further strife for your family after your loved one has passed on. We've seen a lot of celebrity deaths in the news lately, and where their estates are still tied up in litigation to this day. David Ayler, the wizard of wills, the tailor of trusts, is here to discuss and what you need to know. So, Counselor, thanks so much for being here. Of course, this is one of the most important things that a family can do for one another.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you brought up a good example as the celebrities, because that's something we see probably the most publicized. Recently, we had the death of Lou Reed, and he was an artist who had all types of publications beyond music and poetry and things. And I bet you'll start to see a lot of that, those publications coming out. And when that happens, there's going to be proceeds from it. And what you often see is if these wills and these estate plans are not put in place, then there is a lot of inner fighting. And that can go way below celebrities too, with local folks like you and I.
And that's the thing. I mean, this can really tear families apart. I'm sure you've seen it in your practice a number of times, and the easiest way to avoid that is to sit down with your lawyer and just hash this thing out and make sure that whatever you want to go to somebody in your family, your friends, or wherever charity gets put there. That's exactly how it's going to work.
For sure. I mean, for example, here locally, you see a lot of issues with the heirs property because, again, these estates have passed over time and have not been properly put in place. And those wills, or there's been various wills and things like that. And relatively speaking, it's not a difficult process to do. However, most people don't want to do it because they don't want to think about that sort of thing.
Right.
And this is everybody from someone that's 30 years old to someone that's 60, 70 years old. But it's something we really all need to do, particularly if you have things in your estate such as celebrities would have, or other individuals where they have patents and different things that keep making money. For instance, Michael Jackson's estate last year made $160 million. You know, that money has to be spoken for and go to some sort of thing, and the only way that's going to happen is if it's legally put in place.
Indeed. Well, what age do you think that you need to sit down with a lawyer and make sure that you hash this thing out, make sure you get it on paper?
I think any time over the age of 21, at the point that you're starting to establish yourself. Now, obviously, some people establish themselves and have different assets and things at various ages in life. However, the sooner that you get an initial plan put in place, the better. Now, later on, obviously, if you have children and things like that, you can go back and amendment, which is easier than, of course, starting from the scratch, which too often people do.
Well, tell me about that starting from scratch process. How exactly does it work? Do you go to a lawyer and say, these are a list of all of the properties, all of the income, everything, I have the assets that I have, and then you just literally go down the list and mark it off and who gets what?
Well, it all depends on sort of what your situation is. Are you married? Do you have children? That sort of thing. But sitting down with an attorney, and what is usually starting off with just an initial simple will, is the easiest process. And then from that, it may, get a little bit more complex and start some trust and different things like that. But the sooner you do it, the easier it is down the line. And of course, for the chances that something may happen that you weren't planning, your family, your friends, those that you care about, and those charities you care about, all be set in place after your death.
Counselor, that's the best case scenario. What happens if you don't have a will in place and suddenly you unfortunately pass away? Is it up to the family to come together and hash this thing out? Does it work through the courts, or does some of it just go to the state or the federal government?
A lot of both, really. First of all, there's going to be fighting usually within the family, often depending on if there's multiple wills, or sometimes certain things that have been written that they try to argue is a will or in place of a will. Beyond that, of course, you are going to see it go through the probate, and then members of the family that maybe you don't feel are justified will get things simply because that's how it comes down the line. For instance, sometimes people, believe it or not, are separated from their spouse and don't actually go through the divorce process. However, through the probate estate, even if they've been separated for that person from a number of years, if they're not divorced, that spouse is going to receive a large amount of their estate. Beyond that, if they can't find certain individuals within the family or within the connections of the family, then yes, it will go back to the state. That's the last thing we want, right?
Absolutely. Nobody wants that. So if you want to set up a will, obviously go talk to your lawyer. How long does that process take?
It's relatively short. Again, it's really just the process of actually starting it. You can do simple wills and things like that online. Often I think that's risking it a little bit, simply because you may be doing something that you don't completely understand, or it may not be applicable to your state, which can be an issue. So I think it's best, and it's worth the small amount of money to protect yourself, and ultimately you're just protecting those that you care about.
A great advice right there. Attorney David Ayler, thanks for your time, sir. Do appreciate it as always.
Thanks for having me.
Much more Low Country Live after this. Stay right there.